Chapter 7. Before he had his eyes open next morning, Matt knew that something was wrong with this day. When it came back to him, he sat up with a groan. A Tayan! What had possessed him to give a book to an Indian? How could he possibly teach a savage to read? He tried to think back to the time his mother had taught him his ABCs. He could plainly see that brown-covered primer she held in her hands. He had detested it. He had had to learn the short verses printed beside each letter. A. In Adam's fall, we sinned all. That would hardly do. To be honest, he wasn't sure to this day just what it meant. He would feel mighty silly trying to explain it to a heathen. Then happily he recalled another book that had been sent to his sister Sarah from England, with a small picture to illustrate each letter. No nonsense about Adam. A was for apple. Sarah had been luckier than he. But he had no way of making pictures, and there were no apples here in the forest. What could he find for A that an Indian would understand? He looked about the cabin. T for table, though it was unlikely they'd ever get as far as T. How about A for arm? That was simple enough. B, his eye fell on the leg bone of the squirrel left from last night's meal. The stub of a candle would do for C. D, door would be just the word for Atayan. He certainly could walk out of one fast enough, and would again, no doubt, long before they got to D. He doubted that Atayan would come. Still, he had better be ready. He stirred the fire, ate a chunk of the cold Indian corn cake, and set about to prepare a schoolroom. He shoved the two stools together and laid Robinson Crusoe on the table. He did not have paper or ink. He found a ribbon of birch bark in a corner and tore off a strip and sharpened a stick to a point. Then he waited. Atayan came, swinging a dead rabbit by the ears. He slung it disdainfully on the table. "Thank you," Matt said. "That's a big one. I won't need anything else for several days." His politeness brought no response. "Sit here," he ordered. He hesitated. "I never thought as how I'd have to teach anyone to read, but I have figured a way to start." Silently the boy sat down, as straight and rigid as a cedar post. When Matt hunched himself onto the other stool, the boy's scowl deepened. Plainly, he did not like having the white boy so close to him. Atayan had no need to be finicky, Matt thought. He smelled none too sweet himself. The grease smeared on his body, even on his hair, stunk up the whole cabin. It was supposed to keep off the mosquitoes, he'd heard, but he thought he'd rather have the pesky insects himself. He drew a letter on the birch bark. "This is the first letter," he explained. A. A for arm. He repeated this several times, pointing to his own arm. Atayan kept to his stubborn, scornful silence. Matt set his jaw. He could be stubborn too, he decided. He opened Robinson Crusoe. "We'll pick out the A's on this page," he said, trying to control his impatience. He pointed. "Now you show me one." Atayan stared straight ahead of him in silence. Then, to Matt's astonishment, he grudgingly laid a grubby finger on a letter A. "Good," said Matt, copying the word Sackness used so often. "Find another." Suddenly the boy broke his silence. "White man's book foolish," he scoffed. "Write arm, arm, arm all over paper." Puzzled at first, Matt saw his own mistake. "Hundreds of other words begin with A," he explained, "or have A in them, and there are 25 more letters. Atayan scowled. "How long?" he demanded. "What do you mean?" "How long Atayan learned signs in book." "It will take some time," Matt said. "There are a lot of long words in this book." "1 moon? 1 month? Of course not. It might take a year." With one swift jerk of his arm, Atayan knocked the book from the table. Before Matt could speak, he was out of the cabin and gone. "Reckon that's the end of the lessons," Matt said to himself. Cheerfully, he began to skin the rabbit. What do you think? Do you think that's the end of the lessons? Do you think he's coming back?